right. All right. What's up, everybody? We're going live. Welcome to the Parlay Real Talk. Today, it's my privilege. I'm humbled to have Mr. Dean Franco. For those who don't know him, he's like the David Letterman of podcasts for the FMA community. That's what I'm calling you, man. That's what I'm calling you.
Hey, well, that humble and honored. I mean, obviously, there's a plethora of people you could have chosen to have come on. So, yeah, humble and honored, and thank you.
So we've been having some messages off and on, and when people start catching up on here and asking questions, we'll involve them. But we're having a conversation based on empty hand versus blade, and there's been a lot of like posts and feedback within the community. Let's start there. If you can just kind of like give me what your thoughts are, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, so the whole 2-on-1 empty hand against knife started way, gosh, like late 90s, and kind of what happened was I was with one FMA organization in particular, and it was coming from a very FMA traditional aspect of what they call tapping, you know what I mean? And so I was getting this information, and I was going back to my two longtime training partners, which are still my training partners, and there were more grapplers, little to no FMA experience. And so because they had no FMA experience, they weren't giving me like traditional, like, you know what I mean? Like anything like that. It was very rudimentary and very gross. I mean, they were basically coming at me what they witnessed and saw via, YouTube, whatever. And it was so machine in that. And to be honest, the stuff that I was bringing to the table was not working against them. So it was really discouraging. Here I am, the quote unquote FMA guy within our little group, and I cannot stop these guys who had zero FMA training. You want to talk about like borderline depression and, just, all the adjectives. So in conjunction with that, I had a very severe knee injury. So I wanted to keep training. I couldn't stand being on the couch. So I would have guys come at me during my JKD class, my instructor, because I was a liability on the floor. Man, my mobility was virtually zero. I had a full leg brace, and so I have guys come at me randomly when they were taking turns to their rounds kickboxing. So what was coming out was, because I couldn't move, my mobility was compromised, was because I couldn't move. So that natural biological response for me to stop me from getting freaking hacked and killed. So I'm like, huh. So at first, I'm not really sure what to make of the results, because again, I'm talking late 90s, early 2000s, a very heavily concentrated tapping. I mean, combatives and all that wasn't even really talked about, those words and descriptive, adjectives as far as community goes. So I started doing that, and then the next thing I thought, well, his left hands can get me. So then bringing the shoulder in, that was kind of like the next light bulb. And then the other light bulb was, okay, I'm here. I'm not getting killed, but what do I do from here? I'm kind of just stuck here. So I started playing around, and then disarm. That was the last light bulb came. Now, there's been subsequent refinement since then, of course, like rotation, linear to rotational momentum, how to capitalize off that.
Right.
Those were kind of like the three major light bulb moments. One, this. Two, okay, let me bring this in so I'm not, his left hand doesn't have anything to say about it. And then three, what can I do from here? Then the palm up, which I do kind of the push-pull 50-50% energy. That was last light bulb. And then as my mobility started to come back from my injury, I started moving with it. With those, again, with Sewn Machine being the first kind of attack, looking at, and then from there, it started to yield results, gradual increments of pressure, speed, resistance, and they're going in a gradual incremental plane up. But I was happy kind of what I was seeing, and then added some other attacks. So that's kind of when Blade Tech kind of started. And ironically, Carl Atienza gave it the name Blade Tech.
Mm.
At the time, I was a rep for Carl Atienza, and he saw what I was doing. He goes, "Hey, you should call your faction of Atienza Callis, the Connecticut faction, Blade Tech." And so that's where the name came from, ironically.
At the time when you were making these discoveries, how long were you training the FMA prior to?
Well, I at that point had got my certification in Asano Blend, and I loved what I was seeing. I mean, I truly loved FMA, and from there I went to SEOC, and of course Atienza. So probably at that point of discovery, I had just gotten my Asano certification, so kind of 3 years, 4 years in, and then was doing SEOC. Hadn't got my initial instructorship yet in there. So so in other words, in the early 2000s, when it was really starting to develop, I was beyond my knee injury. I was moving well, and kind of doing a movement. Is when I was with Atienza when Carl. So at that point, circa 2002, probably 6 years in or so.
And at that time, you hadn't really discovered how to. You were still having these epiphanies of how to like get that 2-on-1 and control that realistic blade. Do you
This is
not
where
think
it's coming out again. This is so important for folks to know. Now, mind you, I might be tactful. Mind you, if I was in a group, let's just say my training partners were pure FMA guys, I'm not sure I would have came out this, because it would have been a reason, because they would have been feeding me like this.
exactly? This is what I'm trying to allude to.
They wouldn't be right. So the fact that very lucky, fortunate, that these guys were not FMA guys, and they were just like, just gross motor, whatever, what they were seeing, again, what I alluded to before. And so that's what really led it. Like, we had these, wow, there was this really nice marriage among all of us as far as we're going to get, because we were coming from different kind of alignments and what we liked. So it complemented us very well as far as the different backgrounds we had and bringing to the table, so to speak. But much to your point, if it was FMA guys, there'd be no reason for me to do that, because they wouldn't give me those attacks.
Yeah, I think that's crucial, and I think that's part of the reason why I think it's so good. Like most Muay Thai gyms, boxing gyms, or jiu-jitsu, the Holy Trinity, they'll have open mat sessions where you can go spar at other gyms and you can go roll at other gyms, and because of that, you're not always rolling the same people who are like into the same things you are, because like foot locks or wrist locks or whatever it is. Different gyms are gonna have different flavors, but you get to test your shit against somebody giving you that stress, right? Even if they're not giving you the same looks that you're used to. I think the FMA has to have that kind of approach. I know there are some groups already that are doing like monthly sessions, and Sean does the throwdown, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. I think that's where the real merit in that kind of stuff is. But yeah, to your point, when people are feeding you what you're expecting to feed, you're not going to have that same realistic approach. You kind of almost want somebody who doesn't know how to hold a knife and just, hey, listen, here's a game, stab me.
Right. Like, give a little kid a marker who's not going to have any training. They're just going to come at you wildly, and you're going to get caught, because you're going to see them do things that if you haven't trained, then you're going to be like, where the hell did that come from? But, it's such a good point where you made, like, having, like the people that you gave example of in reference. That's so true, because then you can really kind of get into science lab approach and problem solving, because you're not coming from a lens of, like the norm per se. And back in the late 90s and early 2000s, I'm going to tell you what the norm was. The norm was a bunch of drills, coming from a feeder-based system, and then you respond to it based on those attacks. And here's the thing that's really interesting, that I didn't make the conclusion until years later, because I was so immersed in just refining what I was doing. But it's so ironic. In other words, you're learning defenses against the attacks in FMA, generally speaking, that you don't see out what the attacks are like. For instance, why did I get into prison systems? Well, relevance, right? So you're seeing out there that you're defending against attacks that you're not seeing. You know what I mean? But if you look at a true FMA system, and I'm not saying they're not out there, but the ones I've experienced, they didn't show sewing machine. They didn't show overhead. They didn't show the wide slasher. Who didn't care about recovery. They didn't care about they cross midline. They just were trying to take your freaking head off. Boom, right? You know, we see this hole and all that. So the attacks that were being defended against are taught nowhere mirrored to what was happening out there. You know?
Yeah. And I think that's the thing. We spend a lot of time trying to sharpen skills that the chances of us having it to use in that context is. So I want to use an example, right? Because I mean, we had this conversation. I can't share too much because some of the guys don't want us to share, but um, you know, on jiu-jitsu, you start from a bad spot, let's say, right? So somebody will take your back and you start from there and you work, working that. I'm trying to use that same type of mentality for the knife because, if you see somebody who has a blade, great. But chances are, if somebody really wants to stick you, you're not going to see it. So we try to take that context for that bad position and basically, just have somebody stab you from wherever it is. Maybe you can do your drills with the eyes closed until they stab, or you have multiple people around so you don't know who has the blade. But basically starting to learn how to defend from a deficit. Do you do that in your training, and how important do you think that is to realistic type training?
It's critical, and I make the distinction with my students. In other words, to get them acclimated and not to overwhelm them or make the initial stress inoculation just miserable where they don't want to come back because it was just so a negative experience for them. So I definitely show first, but it's definitely with intent, and there's a continuation of the recycling if they were late or maybe they didn't get on it quickly, but they're seeing the consequence as opposed to, in other words, I'm coming, let's say use sewing machine, for example, like coming in and they meet me and then I stop recycling, which is ridiculous because the person out there is going to continue to recycle. Otherwise they wouldn't be there. So I make sure, even though if they didn't defend it properly or give the proper response that should have been elicited, I'm going to keep recycling. So, which is the whole thing, intention and keep the recycling going. Those are the two main things. Much to your point, though, I think that's incredible what you're talking about. Yeah. So once they get beyond that, they're somewhat acclimated. Absolutely. So I haven't turned their back. Now attack's coming. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's the sewing machine. Then yes, boom, boom. Now you got to click into it. But this is where I distinguish though. I tell them also my folks, guys, right now, if you notice, this is kind of ambush stuff, man. You didn't see it coming in this butt. And what I tell them is like, you're just going to have to do the best you can humanly possible under these circumstances. I am not going to guarantee you're going to walk out of here unscathed, alive. But imagine if you had loved ones with you and man, you need to respond and you need to do whatever humanly possible down there so they can get out of there while you're dealing with that. But ambush is tough. Because when we talk about ambush, well, what's the ambush? Okay, somebody comes on behind me and starts at me. Okay, somebody jumps out of bush and boom, right in the sea artery. I'm probably not going home that day. I mean, we have to, so in other words, the integrity of self, honesty to the student body in the community. We have to be honest with ambush that you might not be getting out of their life. I mean, think about this. I mean, you're a big JKD guy. You're in a bar, you're talking to somebody. I snap my finger, get your attention, and boom, right on the jawline. Doesn't mean you're good or bad or indifferent. It means when you turn around, you got ambushed.
Yeah.
Now, throw this in the equation where the consequences are far more expensive. Right?
Exactly. Yeah, and I think that's it too. Like when I first started learning a lot about the blade, obviously you have to recognize the weapon and the lines of attack, but like you almost get used to like it's like you're training yourself to be like, oh well, I'll always see this blade coming, And then I was lucky enough to meet certain instructors that kind of totally changed that. Who are some of the most influential instructors when it came to you leveling up your fight IQ and realistic approach to empty hand versus blade?
Couple on the IQ and formatting and what to look for, how to achieve the utmost functionality, circle functionality with context before methodology, eliciting, maximizing the best out of your students. Tom Sotis of Amok is, I mean, I can go on. I mean, I could just do a whole show on him, but yeah, I mean, in regards to that, to the how to elicit the best performing students, addressing context before methodology. On the physical stuff, David Gould, Lameko, um, Burton, I would say those three and a hug and just a lot of being in the trenches and just doing it for 20 something years. Those four personal experience, just failures, just embracing the failures and having those three as a guiding light, kind of per se, both physical and mental.
Do you find that people nowadays are still testing the same way, that are at the same level of capacity that they should be?
I think there's a few camps that do it really well. I think Burton's, I enjoy what you do. Marco, Burton, Marco, Amok, you, my camp. And I'm not saying there's no others. There could be some guys out there doing phenomenal stuff. But here's where I draw a distinction. Because when I look at folks, what they do, I look for two things. And I tell my guys this, hey guys, when you're looking at videos, I want you to pay attention to two particular things. I want you to pay attention to the initial intent. In other words, if they didn't do anything, is this hitting them? If they just had no sense of self-preservation, they didn't care. Two, what I alluded to before, mentioned, are they continuing recycling? Because what I tell you, watch a lot of videos in camps are not the ones I just mentioned. In other words, they'll, whatever, regardless of the attack, there'll be a contact, a person like defending and doing something, and all of a sudden this person becomes lifeless. Like they don't recycle it. They just kind of just stop the pressure or the resistance.
Yeah.
So I see a lot of that. I see the intention there, but I don't see the continuation of recycling in there. I also don't see a lot of the pre-violence context, what to look for. Are you washing their hands? How did they get there? Like, how did they get there? Assuming, again, not talking ambush, but how did they get there, right? That. And what does the FMA community, generally speaking, refuse to do? They refuse to look at the ground. Like even some clench and knife, I think that's better addressed. But if you look at like pure FMA systems, I see very little knife on the ground. And what I do see is some of it's kind of scary.
Why do you think that is? And do you, like, in the time that you've been training this, do you see upticks in where that ground education will kind of tap into the FMA? And if it doesn't stick around long, or it's not pursued so much, what do you think that is that's preventing the FMA practitioner to really get into that wheelhouse?
Comfort zone, failure, and having to look at their student and say, guys, we're doing things differently now because I don't have answers for this area. And when I tried to do it, I failed miserably. So they need to take a reflection and mirror on themselves. Then they need to address their student body. And some are just reluctant not to do that. Now, this is all side of, okay, maybe they had a severe neck injury and they can't, okay, outside of that. But I think generally, it comes to those things, that reluctance to address that or look at that, that unknown, and not wanting to embrace it. And here's the thing, we're all creatures of habit. We get comfortable in our wheelhouse. So let's just say I'm in this system for 20 years and doing it. I never cross-trained, didn't do much outside of there. You're going to be recycling what's been given to you, to your students. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's really hard for folks sometimes to surrender and acknowledge failures, or furthermore, acknowledge what they don't have or what they're lacking and what their weaknesses are. I mean, that's a tough thing sometimes to come to that conclusion. And then on top of coming from it, whether you're being honest with yourself and your students and doing something about it. I think that is it.
But it's weird though, because the necessity of wanting to have good education and be prepared, you would think that they would invest in that. You would think that they would even send somebody to go learn it, to bring it back. You would think that they would crowdsource and bring somebody from the outside in to just give them basic fundamentals, because when we're talking about something with a blade, you're talking about life and death, but you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't you want to have have that ground element, like formal training.
I totally agree with you. Like, no words. When I was like, when we started this, you said, hey, do you want me to put Dean here? Or do you want me to put the Guru? And Dean, because I'm the forever student. Like, I want to give the best I want to be the best version of myself, and I want to give the best version to my students. And you just tapped on the responsibility of teaching empty hand versus knife is so great. You know what I mean? Like, we have to make sure that we've, turned every rock and look at every possibility. Like, I will throw something out immediately if it's the best for my students, and that, so they have that pliability and flexibility to adapt and change, to look at areas of improvement or maybe where you have deficits and weaknesses. So if you're truly vested in this craft of empty hand against knife, which in my opinion is a long lifetime journey, improvements, failures, retesting, throwing out, incorporating, you know what I mean? And just some are just reluctant. Again, I was mentioning before, that reluctancy to do that because of the comfort of their wheelhouse. A lot of people just, they get think about drills. Okay. Not to digress here, but let's look at drilling versus attribute development. We know that drilling, there's an aspect of memorization, right? And not to say that means that's bad or that there's no benefits to that. But if you're putting attribute development where you're working like, against somebody resisting you and they don't care about your memorization, you know what I mean? There's failures, assuming that the person is truly resisting and all that. And some people, they don't want to fail in their journey at this point. You know what I mean? Watching this dynamic and FMA discussion over now for 400-something years now, I see it like all the time. And I just choose not to, because who the hell am I to tell you what you should do in your journey? Unless, though, here's my issue, and you kind of touched on it. If you're teaching empty hand against knife, I feel there's an ethical obligation that you have tested this stuff out. If you're saying, guys, of course, we're not going to guarantee anything 100%, but this is what yielded the highest results here, not taking into account that it's -7 degrees out there, there's ice and factors like that. But if you have guys that are saying like, okay, yeah, this is stuff that works on, and they haven't tested it and they're giving it to students, I think I have a real issue with that ethically.
That's irresponsible and negligent, right?
100%. But Tom Sodas will go as far to say it's criminal.
Well, the outcome could definitely be.
Yeah. Right.
Now, here's my question. Okay, so Lee, and anybody who's watching this, please chime in and ask questions and get involved here. But there was that post that I made there because I already had my answer, right? But instead of me putting my answer out there, I already know what happens, right? You kind of have to know how to ask questions on social media, right?
Sure.
It's not about what my answer was. I wanted to see, first of all, I wanted to validate that what I was doing, what I was thinking, it was kind of like everybody was kind of thinking that too, right? Because if they're not, then that means you're onto something a little bit different. But also, I wanted to hear people's explanation of what they want to do. So the situation I'm talking about, where somebody grabs and gets a good grip on your lapel or your jacket or your sweater, and that knife comes out. Now, some people were debating, block first, defend the knife first, and then worry about the hand. And some people were saying, look to hit right away and look to deal with that hand right away. I obviously have my conclusions to it. But here's my question. If somebody is naturally a better grappler, all right, then I can see one approach being sound. If somebody's forte is more of a striking and movement, then I can understand why they come to that conclusion. Now, between these two different preferences, right, these two people that are giving us these preferences, they're coming from a very different background with a different set of skills. And they might be able to back up what they're saying. However, it might not necessarily work for the next man because they don't have the same attributes or skills to execute in that wheelhouse. And then there's that middle part where I think we need to get to as a consensus, where it's like, well, most people generally, this is going to be probable, not possible. How do you differentiate that when teaching your students the approach, when training yourself on that approach?
Opportunity versus threat. So I simplify it very there. Like, regardless of what your background is, you could be a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, man. But I grab you, I start throwing to you. You were looking to get this arm move because that's what you've been doing for 20 years, removing freaking grabs, right, off the lapels, right? But meantime, you're taking this. Why? Because you didn't deal with the threat first and you were seeking opportunity, trying to get this. So to me, opportunity threat, just looking at that is kind of where it doesn't, I'm not that it doesn't matter what your expertise, of course that does, and of course that's going to be influential. But if you look at it, you narrow your lens to opportunity and threat. Okay, so like you were doing, which I thought was great that you shared on there, and I wish more people would. Um, okay, if I'm going to be dealing with this grab and all that, man, you're done, as you know, man. You've probably taken what 10 shots to the kidney, and you're bleeding internally, and your life is probably done in a few minutes, right? However, wow, I got to deal with this threat first. I know where the hand is. I'm not going to try to fight to getting this thing off with a guy stronger than me, but I'm going to kind of circle out, hit, so maybe I can swim in and neutralize that. So I tell my folks, opportunity versus threat. Sometimes you got to deal with the threat first to get opportunity. Sometimes the opportunity is there initially, but in other words, weighing the outcome and what is priority at that time,
Your guy, often do you have, like, for example, sometimes we'll have sessions where, all right, this is the scenario. Let's just fucking do it. Let's just see what happens.
That's
right?
absolutely what we do. Yeah.
And and we'll see what happens, and we'll kind of like, okay, let's assess, let's look at the tape, let's see what worked, why did it work. And sometimes we'll be like more objective based, like, okay, you're trying to do this, you're specifically trying to do this. And so, because there has to be like a formula that you can quantify your efforts.
Yeah.
Because if you can't quantify your efforts, you can't really have a statistic of what the percentage is and how often and what the subtle changes. It's almost like chemistry, right?
No,
When you're doing that with your guys, if you do that with your guys, what's your approach?
Okay, let me just back up. I think there's two parties you need to have in your camp if you're addressing this, and then I'll segue into the answer. In other words, if you're doing empty hand against knife, I think you need two people in there to really validate your findings. One, you need grapplers in there. Grapplers have natural elbow home. Whenever you see a grappler just leave his arm out there, natural, I mean, they're going to make your life miserable when they're pulling that back, right? So you got to have grapplers in there, whether they're wrestlers, BJJ, what have you, right? The other thing is you need somebody that knows somewhat sophisticated knife offensively. And that's what made the guys I referenced before, such a great thing, because I had the knife offense, were natural grapplers, and thus it just made, it was a perfect marriage. But I think you need those two in your camp. To answer your question, you identify the problem. Okay, so here's the problem, guys. I'm in mount, and you're coming up like this. What is the answer? Not tight, but you were trying to gross motor. You want to put this thing right in my freaking chest bone. Boom, right? For example. Okay, so then we identify. Okay, going to the threat. Okay, all right, well, I can try to grab that arm when I'm down like this. So, well, that didn't work out too well because he just collapsed him out of my arms. Okay. All right. I'm monitoring that, and then I'm doing a hip bridge like this. Okay, this is yielding a little better. Putting, an escape while simultaneously monitoring to that hand. In other words, you're going to really quickly throw out stuff you know it just doesn't, right? I mean, but here's the thing too, though. There has to be an incremental progression of speed and resistance, because I've seen guys, I can't make this work. And then you look at the way they're training it. It's like, of course you do. You can go slow and start building up on your recognition to reaction to recovery. You didn't, you know what I mean? You want to have full speed, never doing this before, and your results, of course, were terrible. Your methodology sucks if you didn't go about slow. So in other words, the example I gave being on the bottom with somebody mounting. Okay, yeah, just give me like 50%, just like this. You know what I mean? If I don't do anything, it's going to hit me, right? And then you go, okay, it's going pretty good. All right, amp it up a bit. And then, you know what I mean? And then you're throwing the stuff that's not working at 30 or 50%, right? I mean, but when you start getting, and this is just for me, if it starts getting around that high percentage of 80 and all that, again, somebody that's giving you resistance and that, then I look to kind of refine that. Where can I make it better in that? But identify the problem, get people that don't have ego, that are willing to problem solve with you and not bringing their baggage or their emotional attachments with you. Because if that happens, it's going to be really hard to really come to common ground because they have an agenda. So you have to come agenda free. You have to just take your cup, empty it out. You're working together for problem solving. And that's generally speaking like my approach.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the benefits I have with the group of people that I work with is we're not there to make each other look good. We're there to find what the fuck works.
And you know what? Sometimes I hate them. I do. I absolutely freaking hate them. Like I'll come in there like study night before, and this is how sick I am. Like, like keeping nights up thinking about this crap. Like we all do, right? We all get so vested in this, and it's OCD like, you know what I mean? So I go there and I'll have it like what I think is going to be a very good answer and response of something I kind of thought of, seen, and can actually visualize and do. And they'll just throw a wrench in there that I didn't think about or consider. And then they're kind of spelling, and I hate them. Like, but that's that interaction, you love them, hate them,
but love them later.
Yeah,
But do you think that? You see, here's the question, though, right? Like, how do we sort out these people? Because how can we tell the people who are doing it to just expose truth and make us better, differentiate them from people who are just trying to step over you and like look at me, look what I'm doing? Where's your limit for that? Like, how do you know when to have somebody around? Because I think that's part of our responsibility as a trainer as well, or as a practitioners. We need to understand who we surround ourselves around. If they're making us feel too comfortable and they're too good, we need to change. We need to get out of the room. And if you're constantly around people that are just shitting on what you're doing and not like giving you a chance to see, you need to leave the room as well. What criteria you look for?
Yeah, no, that's a good point because, and again, I've experienced that, and like much your point, I leave. Yeah, I mean the simplest answer is leave because they're not going to perpetuate. They're not going to improve your journey. They have no interest in bringing out the best in yourself. I can honestly say my training partners want to bring the best out to me, even though sometimes I hate them. They're like that. They have that commonality and goal, and they're vested in improving me. And these guys have no name. I mean, but I tell you, I put these two guys up against, because they've been with me since day one. They want to remain anonymous, right? So, but much your point, you got to leave because it's going to be unhealthy. They're basically, they don't want to even hear what you have to do or say. They're not even giving you the chance. They're going to crap all over it, whether it's good, bad, or all of that. They're not going to compliment. They're not going to try to help. They're not going to try to improve status quo. Yeah, leave because your time is going to be so much better vested elsewhere. I mean, it's like, here's another thing too, in this, martial arts. I mean, like, do we want around people that are going to help us grow and make us better, right? Something that's going to give us dividends, right? Or it's like, would you buy a crappy stock? No, you want to buy something that's going to appreciate over time and dividends, and that's where we want to put our time. We want to put our time with people and systems that are going to help us become better. So, short answer, like you said, just leave.
When you go to spar, all right, like if you go to gathering, if you go to any function like that, and you're going to test a certain thing, how do you know when and who you're going to try it on? That's the first part of the question. And what do you do after to kind of assess what didn't work out, why, and then what's your routine or process to now correct it?
Yeah, so I did beat the crap out of cancerous folks, and those guys are just stick as their, that's their back. You know what I mean? And they're incredible. So most of my was knife. So what I look at is when I'm sparring around, I probe. You know what I mean? I make sure I probe, make sure my hand is not in the middle of the triangle and the blade, and I see I'm taking pictures of the reaction. Are you overreacting? Are you kind of like, oh, you know what I mean? Are you pulling back a bit? And I see, okay, training, man. He's staying in engagement, but he's not, he's not over exaggerating movements or overreacting. And then from there, hand probing to center, you know what I mean? Shallow, deep, deep, shallow, and fakes depending on their defense. So yeah, that's stuff I look. And, for example, if I'm trying, but then depending on who's in front of me, okay, wow, this is a fight, man. This guy's, I gotta, like I don't have time to experiment here, man. You know what I mean? But if it's somebody that's a little, then I ease off, because the worst thing is that you start pounding on somebody that's just, you know what I mean? Come on now. So I'll take that time to experience failures. All right, I'm gonna be right on the edge of there. So when he comes, I have to do the most, micro adjustment to evade that. But my opportunity is going to be greater because there. So I'll use that as a kind of a training episode and to enhance my subjecting myself to failures and that. So that's how I look at it, by making sure I'm getting something out of it. That's the key thing. Like, if you're going to put man, get something out of it,
When you're training your blade, how much of your time do you spend training with a fixed blade trainer, or one that you have to open? Do you train mostly with what you carry often, like the type of blade that you carry on? Are you spending most of your training sessions with that type of trainer to replicate? And how often do you train your draw?
A lot. So again, opportunity. Here's back to opportunity and threat. So what I do with guys is, okay, so what do you carry? And most of my guys are folders. I mean, matter of fact, I'm trying to think of any of them at fixed blades. So let's go with folders for argument's sake. So, okay, so I'll have a couple training folders that basically replicate most folders, you know what I mean? And so I put this on them. So I'll start at a kind of a 4-step, 3-step gap there. Okay, I'm going to bum rush you. I want you to do whatever you think you need to do, drawing this out and clearing and having space to do that, right? And of course, if it's new to them, they're not doing well. So then I go over, okay, I want you to J out, turn out, and post now. And then I shrink the gap. So maybe we'll start at 4, goes to 3, goes to 2. So what happens is they get really good at the 4. They don't have to make contact with me. They can just turn out, draw, and they're ready to go. 3, again. 2, now they realize they have to deal with threat. Now what I mean by the threat is, now I'm coming at them with a knife, and I already got it out.
Yeah.
Because if they try to deal with the drawing, as we see in the gun community, they're trying to draw their gun and they're just getting freaking killed, right? Their whole center mass is just getting obliterated. So it's the same thing though with drawing a knife. So I said, look, okay, that was close, but you notice that you try to draw first and you didn't deal with this. And I came down with a 12 o'clock, and you know what I mean? And so then they realize, oh, okay. So now they know in that gap, boom, arm drag clear, step turn out. Now they draw, for instance, oh, they got the 2-1 here, this arm, now throw the knife there. So that's how I approach that. But absolutely, drawing under pressure is 100% critical. Whether I don't care if it's a knife, you got a tactical flashlight, pen, whatever it is that you need to get on person, you need to train that under pressure and vary the gaps. So in other words, if somebody's never done that, I'm not going to start from 2 gaps out and just have them experience misery and failure. I mean, that's not fair to them. So, but here, then gradually shrink to now where they have to deal with the threat first and then access opportunity.
I 100% believe that is the type of training that most people are lacking. I'm not saying
look at the gun community. Look at the gun community.
A lot. Like, honestly, because think about this. Everybody, like we were talking about, everybody's already training with the blade out. Everybody's already training with the blade.
Anyway, like they're walking around like this in Walmart.
Yeah, I'm telling you, first of all, with regards to like self-defense and stuff like that, there's a lot of drills you should be doing to read, like we were talking about earlier. Cues. Number one, I mentioned in one of the videos I dropped too about with the grappling. Like if I'm grappling on the ground and I'm already grabbing for you, reaching for you, I'm not just grabbing to grab grips. I'm also trying to feel. And if I feel that blade is there, I'm drawing it, because it's a matter of time you try it, even if you don't have the intent to use it on me. I think these are the details that people need to spend a little bit more time on. We want to start here, and we're going right to the main course. We're not eating those appetizers, right?
But it has to do with the art, though.
No, we're not. And that's what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying. And that's why I want to talk to you about this, because you've been around and seen it, right? And I think like this drill that you just explained to me, I think is a really good drill. In fact, like I'm gonna play with it. You know, there's another good drill from my Seafood Joey as well, and he's like, man, do you know what it's like to be tired of pull a knife? And so he'll do something where he has set up on his timer, and he'll just be shadow boxing. When the timer goes off, he gets down push-ups. As soon as he's done,
I like that.
as soon as he's done his 10 push-ups, he gets up, he practices his draw, he puts it away, shadow boxes until the timer goes again. And as you do it, the more tired you get, you're going to start to see what those hand movements are going to be like, how they depreciate. He'll do the same thing where like the buzzer go off, he'll go on his back, he'll practice crunches. Buzzer goes off, pulling the knife up, getting up and opening it. Like a lot of people are not practicing that, you know. One thing that I like to train too is like if I have a folder, right? Maybe I can get my folder out, right? It's easy to clip that off your pants. That you can train to do fairly quick. However, having the chance to open it or try to open it, like you said, you might not have time. I spend a lot of time on the bag where I pull it out and I'll just have it in my hand like this and I'll practice my hammer fist.
Nice.
Just to hit with the blade. And I'll practice doing the hit and then I'll practice my open. Because just because I can't pull out my knife and access the actual edged portion doesn't mean I can't use that still in my hand like a weapon. A lot of these knives that you get now, they even have the window breaker.
Yeah, they do. Right.
So you're telling me that you can't hit somebody in the head with that?
Oh my God! Like you look at Brom Strength Trimpet. I think that is exactly what you just mentioned. But you touched on an incredible point there. Like, yeah, you get it out, and maybe you get air, but now, right, you're going into maybe that knife's coming, and now maybe instead of parrying it, you're hitting down and then clearing, and now get it out and there. But absolutely, all that should be inclusive. I totally agree with you. I think that is definitely a problem overall. I know some camps do it and they do it well. I don't want to make that a generalization across the whole FMA community, but I think as a whole, I think there could be absolute improvement in that area for sure. And the ground, as we noted, and just defending against realistic attacks. I mean, we've seen enough evidence where I'm not coming and doing.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, it's not to say that won't happen. I think that can happen once the blade is out, and it's like people are screaming, people are trying to grasp whatever's cutting them, people are trying to get away. Once that that moment happens, and that knife is live, that knife is just going to be by nature just try to look for a way to get around its grabbing hand and get to the target, right? Yeah. My instructor told me is like when you're using a knife, when you're the one using the knife, you want to be a painter. Always leave your brush on the canvas.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah,
put the brush on the canvas and keep it there. Yeah.
Yeah. I stab, slash, but I'm always putting out pressure, right? But if somebody stopped me from doing that, of course I'm going to shake my hand and move my hand to get it loose. Yeah. So those motions will happen, but like it's things like not just the ground, but like look at scenarios like wall work. If you ever look at wall work in MMA, like I'll study. I study a lot of wall work in MMA, and even just for like self-defense, and even for the sport aspect of it, right? And even just the wall work with the blade is also so like
absolutely.
How much time do you spend on that, Dean?
I did spend a lot. Matter of fact, you saw that one video I posted. I'm in the corner, and like he's got me grabbed, and he's coming here, which of course. That the quintessential moment where you're dealing with threat first before opportunity. You know what I mean? Like you need to, it's miserable. I mean, again, kind of piggying back what we talked about before, the reluctancy of folks are doing this. Why? A, they don't know how to go about it. They don't know how to train into, being failure induced. And, again, what does the art and memorization bring us? Gratification. Oh man, and that's not to say it shouldn't be gratifying. I'm not putting it down, but what happens is, generally speaking, in this community, we get consumed by it, and then we post the video. Now 1,000 likes came in, and becomes somewhat addictive, and all that. So some folks are going to be just reluctant to experience failure or put themselves in that position because it's not pretty. It's not, you know what I mean? It's ugly. It's freaking sucks. It's exhausting. I mean, there's nothing more that taxes me mentally than collar tie, grab and stab, people getting overhook, underhook. Those are positions I all do. Somebody's got an overhook. Somebody's got a collar tie, lapel grab, under all that. I mean, you need to play with all that. You know what I mean? and the corners. The corner is the worst. They're putting their weight on you. This is coming behind. You have to monitor this so you're not getting, and at the same time, interrupt his mental cycle, so you can now start to get the hell out of there. And I'm going to tell you, not all, far from it that they were all A pluses when doing that. You know what I mean? Yeah, worse.
When you when you're dealing with something like that, are you still using that same type of approach that you mentioned before with the visual cue of closing the gap, or are you sometimes starting that right from as close as you can get and work your way out type of thing?
All the above. So when I first started doing the wall work that you're painting here, like so we play with this stiff arm, because I'm going to tell you all these energies are different. And I highly recommend people play with this. It's not pleasant. It sucks. You're going to fail. I still do. Stiff arm, whatever the stab may be, right? Fold, right? Cross grab. So straight, fold, 3 different energies. I'm going to tell you something, man. You're going to be looking at 3 different things, but the one constant will be you, regardless of how you're dealing, whether it's the fold it, you're pushing off, that the one thing that's going to be constant, you are going to be monitoring that stabbing hand, because if you focus on this, you're dying, or you're dying sooner. I mean, you're dying,
Yeah, I think for that, exactly it. And that's the thing, right? Instead of just being told what to do or taught what to do, it has to go back to scientific and logical kind of strategizing thinking.
Mm.
You mentioned one. The commonality is going to be that knife. Whatever that energy is going to be on me, that main problem is still that knife. Second of all, okay, the grip, stiff arm, folded or cross.
Yeah.
So now you have to understand what is the nature, what is the structure of that thing. Now, regardless with the stiff arm, the forearm, and the cross grip, the one commonality they all have is forward pressure on me.
Totally. And you're getting further pinned.
However,
behind that.
However, that forward pressure has different structure. Like if I have this here, maybe I'll push this to the side to close.
100%.
Stiff arm, maybe go. So like, that's the thing, man. If we don't practice these things, I'm like, okay, this round, this only. This round, this only. This round, this only. And then you have the kibosh round where they do whatever.
Yeah.
You have to apply it.
Yeah. So that's what we do on the wall. And and of course, a student just walking in, am I throwing it? No. Why? Because they don't even have 2-on-1 yet. They don't even know how to keep this here, keep the structure here, where it's not just this, where they can't just go over top here because it's straight. You know what I mean? Like, so there's definitely incremental as far as the approach. In other words, in Blade Tech, that's level 3 stuff. Here's the other thing too. I do my folks. I'll come up to them. I'll engage them with a question. Hey, you got time is, and then boom, collar tie in like this. But again, I say that stuff for level 3. So now, they're working up towards that, because again, stress inoculation can come back to haunt people. Like you throw like folks, in this bad stuff already, and and then make it so intense, the stress, all that could have an adverse effect on them, and they might not want to come back. So I think you have to introduce that incrementally, slowly, responsibly, and there. Now, if private student wanted to jump in, me and my training partner, he might be exposed to stuff we're doing. I'm not going to keep him out. Oh, no, you haven't done this stuff. Yeah, but within a seminar format and all that, I kind of go in a chronological order, just so they have the beginning pieces, so to speak.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that, man. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like, just to share one example, because I've already posted it, we've been problem solving some shit in our sandbox, and one of the things we talk about with our group members is like, hey, we're not moving on from this topic until all of us sign off.
Yeah.
Like if there's still shit that we are not aware of or unfamiliar with or don't feel confident about, I don't give a shit how boring it is. We're staying on it.
Yeah.
Because all that matters is you're getting more and more and more and more and more reps. Here's the other question for you, Dean. How much do you, as the first part of the question, and how much in general, do you think people spend training how to use something as simple as their belt, their shirt, or just everyday things that they can use to kind of defend themselves against an edge weapons if they see it. All right. And we'll just start with that. How often? And the second part was just going to be like, how much training do we spend on like taking care of our wounds after an attack?
So, yeah, weapons, opportunity, or environmental. What can you draw from the environment or opportunity? Yeah, maybe that's on person. You take your belt. I mean, 100%. So definitely play with the belt, play with the the coat. Not sure yet, to be perfectly honest, but definitely the coat, like forearm here, hitting, keeping this as the barrier to take the cuts. 100%. The belt, yeah, anything flexible like that, sure.
At what capacity though? At the same intensity as how you were showing on the wall?
Yeah, I mean, but gradual increments. You know what I mean? Yeah, yeah. Like in other words, that is kind of my methodology. I introduce you to it, and depending on your background, if you've done this, and yeah, we'll just jump into it. But assuming the person I have in front of me needs to get acclimated to this, hasn't done this, and then go increments.
Lay it out for them quick.
Yeah, then before you know it, 10 minutes in, we're probably hitting 80%. You know what I mean? And that, and so the one thing I do hold myself accountable to, and I need to get in this area, and guilty as charged, I have to get into the medical aspect, the CPR. I have CPR, but just first aid component, I'm holding myself accountable. That's something I got to start doing. So
yeah, no, because man, I have a buddy of mine. He was on my podcast before, and you should watch it. His name is Tim Dobson, and
Tim
he had,
Johnson.
yeah, he's a Bondo guy. He's one of like the highest ranking Bondo guys in Canada, and
Okay.
I'll send you the podcast. He came home to his wife being stabbed by a family member.
Oh.
And it was crazy. Like I had a really hard time. I needed to think about how I was going to ask him to share his experience.
Mm.
And the reason why I wanted him to share his experience is because, like you see, so many fucking people are showing this fucking knife shit. And, it's like, guys, do you even know what it's like to see? Like, put it this way. He made a comment to me that totally changed the way I think about knife training.
Mm.
He said he couldn't even hold the phone to call 911 because the blood was so oily.
Slippery. Yeah. Wow. Think about that. Like just making the phone call.
He said, like, he's like, this guy will grab his training blade, put his hand in oil.
Nice.
Then take it out and stab like logs and shit. Because, man, imagine now doing knife defense. That could be a thing, right? So, like, now here's the drill. Go up against the wall, Dean.
Yeah, I know.
First round, I'm going to stab you. All right? You're going to do your defense. If I stab you a couple times, we take a second. Now on the next round, you're stabbed, right? Put your hands in oil. I put my hands in oil. Let's play the game now.
That's a good thing to do. Like, I mean, the only thing I have not done, I'm going to be pretty honest. I've heard like making, obviously heard the oil thing before. I just know, I mean, obviously through sweat, man, like we're working out for an hour and you go to do that 2-on-1 and they're sweaty, man. But I'm not saying that nearly constitutes what you're talking about. But yeah, I mean, that, a matter of fact, I'm writing down right now because I want to do anything to enhance what I currently do.
And then here's the other thing. That oily feeling with oxygen becomes tacky.
Wow. I gotta do that. Oil. Right. What oil? Like what oil? What oil? Any oil? What do you guys do?
Using like fucking just a little bit of olive oil
or a vegetable.
I'm not going crazy with it. I'm just like, yeah.
Oh yeah. But no, definitely right. Yeah. But still, though, it's something I want to definitely do. Like I'm all for all that stuff to enhance what I do. Or worst case scenario. So when the scenario is not the worst, I mean, hopefully the results then are going to be so much better. Because I've been dealing with the worst. That's kind of how I tend to think about things, you know what I mean?
100%. And the reason why I bring him up is because like he had to deal with his wife. He had to deal with the shock of what he saw. He had to deal with which he described to as he when he walked in the room, it looked like somebody had a bag of blood, poked a hole, and went like this.
Oh my
Right?
gosh.
This guy had to do for real what we all talk about, right? For his loved one. And
Mm.
now, he put the tourniquet on her and everything like that. I'm like, man, he could have been so good at helping disarm this knife off that person. But if he didn't spend the time on learning how to put on that tourniquet, none of that shit would have mattered.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
So it's like, I think there's a big, big deficiency in,
You're right. And I
in,
admit it. I have it. And that's
yeah,
something I need to like start taking and all that, which I'm going to do because you're right. Like we need to yeah, I mean, and it's like one of those things, in my opinion, talking about this, it's like, well, do you know how to change a flat tire? I mean, it's just one of these things that you just gotta, you know what I mean? You just
yeah,
gotta have and do. So I'm holding myself accountable. Absolutely. I'm negligent and I'm going to change that.
yeah. So I know you got you worked on a project recently with Kevin Goat from
Kevin Goat.
Calgary. This Calgary, right? Calgary Martial Arts Academy.
Yeah.
So tell me about that. What was the focus? Why did you collaborate with him? And what was the goal you guys are trying to reach with that?
So much like kind of what happened with me and you, we kind of knew each other. Had some dialogue and conversation here and there. But what really he had posted something much like you did, and it was definitely regarding empty against knife and a 2-1. I think what he was doing was something he was going to, if I'm not mistaken, Russian tie. And just, politely, respectfully say, hey, have you ever looked at the inside position? I'm just curious and all that. And then that led to a conversation off the group and to Messenger, which led to us doing a joint online session that was well received. Actually, we did a couple. From that, it kind of came up, hey, why don't we put a project together, a DVD together, or I'm sorry, an online downloadable program. I know DVD, geez. Downloadable program together. So yeah, so that I flew up to there to go see him, and he kind of took his approach regarding 2-on-1. We both agree 2-on-1 is so we both are in alignment of that. So he put his approach, I put my approach. And so folks that get it, they're able to see the two approaches, but the common denominator is that we both believe in 2-on-1, regardless of the attack to get there. Because of his size and all that, he has some different finishes he gravitates toward. Because I'm a big guy on taking my momentum, turning into levers for disarms, I was more focused on that. But there was definitely congruency among us in there. And so, yeah, it came out really well. It's still out there. Kevin has it on his website, the information, as well as he started a private group here on Facebook. But yeah, really went really well. Like-minded guy, obviously talented. It's funny. I knew he was tall, so I get out of the airport. I'm going through customs, and so again, I knew he was like 6'4". I didn't realize though, like how big he was. So I'm like walking over to him. I'm thinking in my mind, like, this is gonna be a long weekend. My right shoulder is going to be because this, boom, it's
Yeah.
car crashes, man. You're doing like 100 reps of just and then I'm looking at and it was Friday night. He wasted no time. He wanted to see my stuff and all that, and yeah, 100 car crashes. So yeah, good
Wow.
guy. Good guy.
Are you guys thinking about presenting that somewhere in person in the near future?
Yeah, absolutely. That has definitely been brought up. Yeah, we're just looking like what audience we should, I guess, target. The problem here's what I find. It's hard, you would think the FMA community would be the audience to target. It's really not. It's really, I mean, because much like I was discussing before, they're so engrossed with their own methodology and what they've been handed down to them. They have a reluctance to change. But the combative community, other disciplines of martial arts, BJJ, I think is a fine complement in there. I find those are going to be more the audience. I think we're going to have better response from, as opposed to just going directly into the FMA lane. And there could be some folks in the FMA lane that might be open to that, but I think generally speaking, that's going to be a hard community, knowing that they dress things a certain way and their reluctance to change. Because here's a question for you. Okay, let's look at it this way: pure 2-on-1, right? Pure 2-on-1. Who do you mostly see doing it? You don't see mostly pure FMA guys doing it. You see guys that are kind of out of the FMA wheelhouse, but they have a foot in FMA. I mean, obviously, it goes without saying I have a foot in FMA, but I'm doing 2-on-1. It's mostly people that are not 100% pure FMA, if you think about it.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and I'm going to say this now so that's recorded. In about a decade, I think BJJ practitioners are going to revolutionize the way knife defense is done.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I think the potential is 100% there. Whether or not they'll do it as a whole community.
Well, I say this, okay? Myself being a jiu-jitsu person,
yeah,
and I have some friends of mine who are Kali guys, who have been Kali guys for a long time, and some of them now are competitively competing in BJJ. Now, here's the thing: BJJ is a very tight-knit community that prioritize their BJJ above everything else. It's what they know. It's what they spend their time doing.
Sure.
They have a lot of data and background and feedback that says that it's effective, especially in sports. However, what they're lacking is the dangers of the blade. And we talked about this before. Their go-to movements of like double grips or gripping like that is not always going to be beneficial against a blade. Right? So once all they need is that little bit of education, because understanding how to use a knife will take less time than understanding how to be a good grappler.
100%.
So now that you have these Kali guys with some decent skill, and who have most of them have been in gatherings and stuff like that, now you have them going into the BJJ communities, building relationships, gaining their trust, learning their art. Now they're going to be like, hey guys, let's play with this. And you watch how that shit takes off, and you watch what they come up with now. All right, because one thing the BJJ community is constantly evolving on their tactics.
100%.
Because they need to for competition.
There you go. You're right. They have to be relevant.
So I'm willing to put my chips that in the next 10 years, the ground grappling with the blade is going to be like on a whole different level.
You know who's kind of part of that? Burton.
Yeah.
I mean, Burton, 3-stripe BJJ black belt. I mean, his program, he put some ground stuff in there. So I always said the fusion of the two, if you were, I mean, like I mentioned to you, who do you need in your camp to be proficient at empty hand against knife? In my opinion, you need two people in your camp. You better have a good grappler in there and a guy who on a dime can change that, where for who's ganyos and fakes and recovery, those two are going to make your empty hand against knife better than anybody else, having those two people in your camp.
For me, what I look for are four main pillars. I need the guy who's good with the blade and who has the FMA experience. That's the number one.
Yeah.
That's a no-brainer, right? Number two, I need the jiu-jitsu man. Number three, I need the Thai clinch.
Clinch, clinch. I throw that under the grappler, but fair enough.
Yes, but the reason why I make the specific claim with the Thai clinch is because the Thai clinch is the like halfway point between stand-up grappling, but also finding the holes for the strikes. Because if I'm grappling standing up, they both have an understanding of base with sweeps. They have an understanding of hand placement. Yeah. They have an understanding of how to fill the holes with the strikes, and also the versatility of their knees. I think it's huge, because while I have that 2-in-1, as well as I do, just standing there holding that fucking hand is going to do nothing for you, but in a matter of time get you stabbed.
Unless you're buying time for the loved ones to get out. Other than that,
even still, I want to be able to make sure and ensure my loved ones are safe after, right? So if I'm holding that 2-in-1, those headbutts, those knees, all that shit still needs to be in play, right?
Yeah.
So I have to have him and the judo man.
Did you know, man? No, definitely see your point. Like, in other words, I just have gross knife guy, grappler, but definitely the clinch and all that under the grappler. I'll be honest with you, judo. Let me hear it. Let me see.
Well, think about it. If you come into a clinch,
Yeah,
right away you have tactile sense.
correct.
So the judo guy understands kazushi.
Okay.
He understands balance, right? So during the struggle where this knife hand is moving, you don't tell me these guys are not going to be able, especially if they have a hand on you or the hand on the leg, they're not going to find where those foot sweeps are.
Oh yeah.
Outside foot sweep, inside foot sweep. If it's tied in a collar tie, how to be able to throw them, how to be able to hip throw them, how to be able to. These guys have a lot of stuff that, like, and in all honesty, if a good way of knife defense is being able to make this person hit the fucking cement,
that would be a wonderful, yeah, right.
without me going down with them.
Well, you're going, yeah, 100%, right.
Right. So, like, for me, it's invaluable. Like, judo is such a good martial art for defense. If you can throw somebody, toss somebody, like, chances are people are not going to look. Most people are not coordinated, especially if they don't train. Most people who train are not going out there trying to stab people. Most MMA guys are not out there trying to stab people. Thank God, right? We'll see what happens when the grocery stores go empty. But for now, it's not the case, right? Yeah. So most people are not that as coordinated as you think.
True.
Right. So, like, if you got a guy who throws you and you're not used to being thrown, chances are you're gonna probably break your shit when you fall.
Yeah, not knowing how to break fall and
like smacking your head on the ground and stuff like that. So being able to toss somebody or make them trip and fall, that's huge. And that could buy a lot of time, right? That could buy a lot of time. Learning how to control and hit in the clinch, that's really important.
Yeah, have that, definitely. Yeah,
learning how to grapple on the ground. Like, so that's why for me, it's like, that seems to be my ingredient for now.
I think it's great. No, I mean, there's enough parallel what you're saying. I never thought from the judo aspect. I see a lot where we do have some of that stuff, but nothing. I'm not by no means saying it's judo. I don't want to get misconstrue that. You know?
Yeah, but in all honesty, it's like I'm using judo. If you were more of a silat guy, it's the principle's the same. It's off balancing and getting your opponent.
Yeah, the moment of contact, getting off balance and capitalizing on.
Yeah, whether it's sambo, judo, like whatever it is, it's being able to make that person fall on their ass and off balance them. I think that's a huge one too, because that was the other thing that we noticed too. Is like when they had that 2-1 while they're trying to stab me. If I see that their body goes really low, I'll use the arm to, like, almost like a snap down to make them go to the ground.
Yeah,
you know.
No, I mean,
paying attention to where their body is, though.
Yeah, and most attackers, they, like, much to your point, that sensitivity or the acuity of knowing their body and all that is probably not going to be there. They're just going to come with a gross attack, and so I mean, and again, thank God on that. But yeah, no, I think it's, again, this is why I have such profound respect for those who do this area, and they do it with integrity and honesty, and they do it showing their work like full out, and just because it's so difficult. It's to me, outside of multi-man, a gun pointed where you're 5 feet, where you can't get tangibility on it, it's probably one of the most difficult things in martial arts to do, empty hand against knife. And
I think it's the scariest.
And I mean, let alone that. I mean, and I take it so seriously, probably too seriously, but I just feel such a burden of giving the best stuff to my students and being responsible. God forbid one day if they did encounter, and knowing that I gave them the best information and approach methodology as humanly possible, that God forbid if something did happen, they would know how to go through this order of events, prioritizing pending the threat and all that, and what to do. And I think that's the best we can do as instructors. We have to be integrity, honest with students, and just tell them that, man, I'm not guaranteeing you're going home unscathed, but I'm giving you the best stuff through this evidence of the science lab approach. And I don't know, what else can we do? I think it's better than we're doing than most. You know what I mean?
And I think that's why you're well received and well respected, because in all honesty, you got a lot of experience and stuff like that, Dean, but you just seem like I've never met you in person, but you just generally seem like a good person who actually cares. And I think that's one of the most important things, because if we start doing this out of a place of caring for the outcome of others, and making sure we hold ourselves accountable and responsible for what we're sharing with them, then I mean, you can't, whether it's not for everybody, you can't go wrong being like that. You know what I mean? It has to come from that. I think that's where it came from. Just a couple questions before that you go. How much time do you spend training defending a knife from a fixed position? Because that seems to be a lost art now, I think.
I'm sorry. So when you say from a hostage holdup,
Yeah.
that's how blade tech started, actually.
Oh, really?
So what I call center position. It could be under here, here, there. So the whole hands up and boom, there. Not doing here. So open heart surgery, but knocking it out and getting 2-on-1 or there. And before I went to move, because when I had that knee injury, I was having guys come both static position, I would call them static positions, and then of course moving. But yeah, I spent a lot of time on that. You turn around and somebody's holding you up like that. Give me your wallet, right? I mean, it's because what do we do? And everybody gets what you see in FMA. Everybody's fixed on the moving. But what if the guy comes up behind you, puts a knife behind your back, and wants your wallet? Do you know to elbow his back and then and turn and get to 2-on-1? So yeah, definitely have a curriculum based on that from the varied positions on the body.
To play devil's advocate, okay, because this is the question that I'll think about this all the time. And one day I'll say one thing and think one thing, and the next day it'll totally change. When you're training that, right? How do you know when you should make a move, or should you just give them the damn wallet?
Oh, I tell my folks, no, man, by all means, just give them what they want. I mean,
Right, for the most part. But when we if we're spending the time to train to react, what is the litmus? What is the prerequisite, that flag that says, okay, it's time to go?
To me, so in other words, under blade tack, I have triangles. Triangles establish contact. There's 6 triangles. One of them is egress, equalizer, ethical obligation. 3 E's, right? So under that is, okay, if you can run. If you can get access to equalizer, all means. You can get access to equalizer to run, perfect. Ethical obligation. There's a whole gamut of issues in there. So I'm going if he wants more than just my wallet or my family, and I need to tie him up so they get out of there. So to me, I'll do everything humanly possible to give him whatever he needs, whatever he wants, to create the egress or get me to an environmental, equalizer or something I have on person. But the ethical is really where that's when I have to commit to them, because they're loved ones that I need to protect, or there's just no damn egress. I'm in a teller machine. I turn around doing late night banging and boom. Well, I have to go through him to get the egress. But again, if I give him what he wants, he doesn't want it, or you could just, that doesn't satisfy. Well, yeah, you have to go. But to me, highly based on that ethical aspect, that there's loved ones for me to protect. I need to be the barrier between them and him, and I need to tie them up to create the egress for them.
Yeah, it's hard because, and I've seen so many videos where people are being held, and then for whatever reason, they decided to make a move, and it was to their detriment.
Yeah, like obviously give them, hey, here you go, and then toss it. And but I'm giving the example by myself. So we definitely play this, boom, toss it over there and get out of there. When they look over there, what you toss. I mean, 100%. But ethical throws a whole nother dynamic and dimension when you got loved ones. So matter of fact, I do what we call mock scenarios. And so the mock scenarios can be anywhere where, like, I start out, okay, it's one-on-one. I come up there and ask you a question. Hey, what time is it? Hey, where's Main Street? And sometimes I'll just leave. You satisfy my query, I go, right? Sometimes, though, I'll continue to gain proximity on you, knowing that obviously not interested in the time. I'm just using it to gain proximity to do what I want to do to you. So then they have to click into that and know that, Jay out, forward, hands up, moving fence, and know when to go, because I'm not getting out of there. Throw loved ones in there. So they say, look, okay, so now you got your family there, same thing. I'm going to be bridging you, okay? So in other words, you have to play these out, and this is so important. Folks will go like, well, I'll know what to do. No, you won't. You have to play this stuff out, and you have to play it out if you have loved ones. Like, in other words, we all have plans around the house. Like, okay, kids, if a fire happens, this is what I want you to do. Well, why wouldn't you have that with your family or loved ones? God forbid something like parking garage just spook me, man. Anything can go wrong in a freaking burn. You're leaving a show. It's just, you got lines of cars, you got columns. I mean, it's just like a haven, man, for criminal activity, right? So when I'm leaving, my family has a plan. Somebody comes, I'm intersecting him. You guys are getting to the car going off, or you're calling for help wherever the egress is, whether the car's closer or the egress. But I plan.
Yep. I just made a post actually on my Facebook of a routine I have with my daughters when I go to the mall and stuff like that.
Fantastic.
And it's
You'd be
like,
surprised how many don't, Mark. You'd be surprised how many don't.
I'm telling you. And it's just like, people are like, well, how do you know what's going to happen? I'm like, well, how do you fucking know you're going to be in a building that catches on fire? You still did a fire drill, right? Stupid. Like,
Stupid.
you know what I mean? When you're under stress, you don't have the time to be like, well, what should I do? It's like, oh
shit. Be like more like you and Renee, like just so stupid. Swear, I just wish one day I'm just gonna transform into just.
Trust me, it hasn't always made me friends. But listen, I'm just honest. You know what I mean? Like, you got to be stupid to think there's no value in that. Otherwise, why would you train that in school? Like
100%. Like, exactly. Why do they do it in school?
You don't have time. If there's something unknown, like for example, when you're doing Shark Tank and you're rolling, right? Sometimes I'll put a knife on, like a training knife, obviously, but I'll put one on you while I'm rolling with somebody. They don't think I'm going to be doing knife. They think it's just jiu-jitsu. And then I pull it on them. The shock on them versus, hey, somebody's going to have a training blade. It changes everything. And if you have no plan or no reference point, when that shit happens, that moment of I don't know what to do will take over, and you are screwed because you only have seconds. Whereas my kids know if something happens, yes, they're going to be scared, but their brain's going to go to what they know.
At least you prep them. You're prepping them.
Yeah. So, like I'll tell you something, man. Before I did any martial arts, when I was about 17 years old, I was in an elevator with one of my best friends who's passed away since then. His name was Ryan Lanawet, rest in peace. I had a knife pulled on me in an elevator by a bunch of guys who were looking for me. I was going to court at the time. Right? So I wasn't even supposed to be in their area. I was supposed to be on house arrest. I wasn't supposed to be near them. So I was there anyway because I'm stupid. And these guys saw us there and they chased us. And we ran into a building trying to get to our friend's home apartment, right? So we can, lay low and then see if we can get out of there after. They caught up with us in the elevator. And mind you, it was only a small, but they put that on my stomach in an elevator.
Yeah.
And I tell you firsthand, it's like, I wasn't fucking doing anything. I mean, I had no training. And I think about it now. I was like, if I had training, would I have been stupid enough to think I was a fucking hero and do something? Because it probably would have been worse. But all I remember feeling was just like, when it was there, it's like everything just hyper-focused. It was weird. I just watched his arm. I wasn't even looking at the knife. I just watched his arm. I was just like watching to see any movement.
Yeah.
And I just kind of just stayed calm. I just stayed calm. And I just like, I wasn't ready. I was not even thinking to do something, but just my instincts was just like, I was locked on his arm.
Yeah.
Maybe if he moved and I got stabbed once, maybe I would have done something, but I wouldn't have known what to do.
Right.
Right. And the fact that I was in a confined area, I was just like, I knew I was at their mercy. And all I did was just like, look at my friend. My friend looked at me as if to say like, when you swing, I swing. We just I played it cool. But as soon as that elevator door opened, and they're like, they're getting out. It's like, okay, things change. But just like being able to stay calm in those moments and not escalate it more than I had to. I look back and I really think, I'm like, man, I knew nothing. Had that been now, even though I have more training now, would I have acted as smart?
Yeah.
Because that's the other problem too, is we think we do all these reps and we're going to be able to just do whatever. And like,
no, I know. And this is what I know. And that's back to the whole aspect of integrity and honesty. I think, in other words, I truly believe me and you and people that kind of follow what we do in this difficult pursuit of empty-handed against knife, the fact that we're honest and all that, I think that's the best we can do. Like, we're like, you know what I mean? And I think and here's the thing, like, I was telling somebody this, and this isn't that long ago. I want to say maybe like a month ago. And my exact saying to him is, sometimes I don't know who I am to think I should be teaching this stuff. And then I go, but you know what I do sometimes to kind of get me back into that lane? I'll go look on YouTube and I'll see what's out there being taught. And I said, I'm good.
Yeah. No, it's like, yeah, there's a balance because definitely, Dean, I'm not going to say names or anything like that because honestly, everybody has the right to do and pursue what they want.
Sure.
100%. Everybody has a right to contribute. And if I know something and I feel like somebody could benefit from it, of course, I'm going to share it. The problem comes when you start to perceive and market yourself in such a way where it's no longer about like that purpose.
Yeah.
You know, it starts to become something else, like a gimmick, like a you become like a salesman rather than a someone who's selling, who's giving tools, you know. And you know, sometimes like doing the videos and stuff like that is fun, Dean. Don't get me wrong. I like it's like its own different process.
Yeah.
Right. And like the reason why I originally wanted to do it is because I wanted to document what I love doing. I wanted to document myself. So when I'm an old man with no teeth shitting myself, I can look back and say,
daughters.
I can look back and say, fuck, I was having fun, you know?
Yeah.
And my kids have something to remember me, you know?
Absolutely.
Like, but there is this place where you start to like, it's like a balloon, man. If you're not tied down to a rock, you're gonna fucking.
You can't hear you know, that's so interesting you bring this up, like a balloon. I think that's such a great analogy you made. Like, in other words, like, and I can tell you from experience with FMA discussion where like I've intentionally always tried to keep myself grounded. Like I never wanted this to be bigger than me. I mean, like it was always the focus on promoting FMA and filling this void that of coverage of live interviews with FMA folks and that. But the same applies to Blade Tech. I said this will not be prostituted. I will not have a rep in every country. That is not my interest. I will not be posting vids what I do on Blade Tech unless it's to help somebody, like for instance, like with your post recently, right? But if you notice, I don't be posting stuff like that. I just think because but much your point, staying grounded. And I think because I know I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be seen like that. You know what I mean? You know?
Yeah, it got to the point where I was like doing some projects and stuff like that. And even though I was happy to share and I was getting good response, like sometimes I would look at it and just cringe and be like, you know what? I think I need to chill the fuck out a little bit and just get back to just training. Because I'm not trying to be like this podcast. I do it when I feel like it. Yeah. I don't have time to be consistent. Like I commend you guys because I look forward to your guys' shows and stuff like that. But like with regards to me, what I do, it's like spontaneous. When I feel like there's a topic, like how we came up to that conversation, like, hey, it's more of like that, you know. And I think for me, I'm good at that capacity because it's for me, it's like the quality versus quantity is what's important for me.
Yeah, especially with anything against knife. I mean, you want to talk about quality over quantity, man. You know what I mean? You know, it's like that's like the quintessential example of like less is more. You know.
All right, Dean. Well, listen, man. It's been almost an hour and a half. I'm not sure what your schedule's like, but I really appreciate the time.
Oh my God. Thank you.
I always learn when I'm talking to you. I hope everybody else learned some stuff and thought about their process. And guys, post your work in the FMA discussion.
Absolutely. And that's another thing, man. If you come up with something and you believe in it, don't let people deter you because of maybe they're telling you not work. If you believe in it and you can substantiate it, man, get behind it and post it. Absolutely.
100%. All right, Dean, just stick around because I'm going to end the stream, but couple things I just want to talk to you about real quick.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.